The first thing I did when the plane reached cruising altitude was turn my phone on, switch it to airplane mode, and open the custom app I'd built. It was a simple black screen with stark white text. It displayed a single line, System Integrity Check, 71 hours, 59 minutes, 42 seconds. It was a countdown timer. My name is Daphne, and for the last 6 years, I was the sole systems administrator for Agile Freight Dynamics, a mid-sized logistics company that was, at this very moment, blissfully unaware that it was on life support, and that I had just pulled the plug. Well, not pulled the plug. That would be messy. I had simply scheduled a system-wide, mandatory, and utterly catastrophic security update that only I could stop. If you've ever been the one person who knows how everything really works, the one who is simultaneously mission-critical and completely invisible, then you need to hear this story. And do me a favor, hit that like button and let me know in the comments that I'm not just screaming into the void. It helps to know you're not alone when you decide to burn it all down. It had started, as these things always do, with a betrayal disguised as a casual conversation. 2 years. For 2 straight years I had been denied a vacation, not a long one, just a week. A single week to not be the person responsible for every blinking light, every database query, every panicked 3 a.m. call about a shipment that had vanished from the system. The first year, it was the Q4 push. Marcus Thorne, my boss and the company's COO, had put his hand on my shoulder with that infuriatingly paternalistic smile of his. He'd said, "We just can't spare you, Daphne. You're the backbone." I had swallowed the bitterness and accepted the compliment for what it was, a gilded cage. The second year, it was a major software migration. My software migration, to be precise. One I'd planned and executed single-handedly. He'd said, "Nobody else understands the architecture. It would be irresponsible to leave right now. We need you." And like a fool, I'd nodded, believing that my indispensability was a form of job security. I see now that it was just a leash. This time was different. I walked into his office, a glass-walled box that looked out over the entire open-plan floor, and I didn't ask. I told him, "I'm taking a vacation, Marcus. From June 10th to June 20th. My flights are booked." He leaned back in his leather chair, the picture of magnanimous authority, and steepled his fingers. He had this way of looking at you like he was solving a particularly tedious math problem. "Daphne," he'd said, sighing, "we've been over this. The new client, Global Imports, is still in their probationary period. The system needs to be flawless. Any downtime, any glitch, and we could lose them." He was right about the client, but he was wrong about the reason. The system was only flawless because I was there to catch its stumbles before anyone else saw them. I just stood there, my bag on my shoulder, my posture screaming a resignation he couldn't see. I didn't argue. I didn't list my accomplishments or the hours I'd put in. I just waited. He saw my silence, not as defiance, but as a problem to be managed. "Fine," he finally huffed, waving a dismissive hand. "Just go. We'll manage." Those 3 words were the key. We'll manage. It wasn't a concession. It was an insult. It was a declaration that my 2 years of canceled plans, my 60-hour weeks, my intimate knowledge of every line of code that kept his multi-million-dollar operation afloat, were ultimately trivial. He honestly believed the company ran on his boardroom speeches, and not on the silent, thankless work of the woman he treated like a utility. He didn't know that managing, in my world, involved a complex symphony of automated scripts, fail-safes, and data integrity protocols that I had built from the ground up. Digital ghosts that haunted every server, every network switch, every single piece of data that flowed through Agile Freight Dynamics. And every one of those ghosts answered only to me. He smiled, thinking he'd won. "Go," he repeated. "Enjoy Fiji." He probably imagined me checking my work email poolside, unable to truly let go. He couldn't have been more wrong. On the plane, I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel panic. I felt a strange, cold calm. I looked at the countdown timer. 71 hours, 58 minutes, and 12 seconds. It wasn't about revenge. I kept telling myself that. It was about demonstrating a fundamental principle of engineering. When you remove a critical component, the machine stops working. I was that component, and I was about to prove it. The feeling on the plane wasn't joy. It wasn't the giddy excitement of a long-awaited vacation. It was the quiet, hollow hum of release. After years of sustained pressure, I leaned my head against the cool plastic of the window, watching the endless quilt of clouds below. For 6 years, I had lived in a state of low-grade, perpetual anxiety. My phone was never on silent. My laptop was never more than 3 feet away. I dreamt in server logs and status alerts. Every holiday dinner was punctuated by a quick check of the network uptime. Every weekend was a tightrope walk, waiting for the inevitable call about a database that wouldn't sync, or a routing algorithm that had choked on a bad data entry from some sales guy in another time zone. I was the company's digital firewall, its ghost in the machine, its 24/7 emergency service, and the company, in the form of Marcus Thorne, saw me as a line item, a piece of infrastructure, reliable, necessary, and utterly devoid of a human soul that might need, after 2,190 days of constant vigilance, a week off. As the plane droned on, the facade of professional calm I had maintained for years began to crack. It wasn't a sudden shattering break, but a slow crumbling. It started with a tremor in my hands. I clasped them in my lap, but the shaking continued. A wave of exhaustion so profound it felt like a physical weight washed over me. This wasn't a vacation. It was an evacuation, an escape from a building I had designed and built, but which had become my prison. The memories, suppressed for the sake of getting the job done, started to surface, unbidden and sharp. It's funny how your mind protects you, walling off the 1,000 tiny cuts of disrespect, until one final insult brings the whole dam down. Marcus's casual, dismissive "will manage" wasn't a paper cut, it was a sledgehammer. I thought about Alex. He was the only other person in the IT department, a junior tech I'd hired 2 years ago. He was brilliant, a kid with a natural intuition for systems architecture that you just can't teach. He was curious, hungry to learn, and saw the network not as a collection of boxes and wires, but as a living ecosystem. I saw myself in him, that same spark. Marcus, however, saw him as a cheap pair of hands, a gopher to run cables and reset passwords. Marcus actively undermined him, belittled his questions in meetings, and dismissed his insights as naive. I'd spent months quietly mentoring Alex, feeding him documentation, walking him through the logic of my scripts after hours, teaching him the why behind the what. It was an act of professional generosity, but it was also an act of defiance. I was cultivating knowledge in a place that rewarded ignorance. I was planting a garden in a concrete slab. A specific memory bloomed, vivid and toxic. It was about a year ago. A critical server rack had lost power due to a faulty power distribution unit. A simple hardware failure, but it took down the entire warehouse management system. It was 2 a.m. I was on site within 20 minutes. Marcus arrived an hour later, smelling of expensive cologne and complaining about his interrupted dinner. He stood there, arms crossed, a useless king, surveying a crisis he couldn't comprehend. He kept asking the same question, over and over: when will it be back online? He wasn't asking for information. He was asking for a scapegoat. I worked for the next 18 hours straight, rerouting network traffic, spinning up virtual machines from backups, and manually patching data streams to keep the trucks moving. Alex was there with me, handing me tools, running diagnostics, his young face a mask of awe and concentration. We got it back. By nightfall the next day, the system was stable. The company had lost thousands, but it could have been millions. The next week, in a company-wide email, Marcus announced a successful crisis management effort led by him. He took full credit. My reward, a $200 gift card to a steakhouse. Marcus received a 5-figure bonus for executive oversight. Alex got nothing, not even a thank you. I gave Alex my gift card. He tried to refuse, but I insisted. I told him, "We know who did the work. That's what has to matter." but saying it felt like a lie. Then there was the ERP project, the Enterprise Resource Planning System. It was the company's digital brain, handling everything from inventory and shipping to billing and human resources. The old system was a patchwork nightmare I had inherited. The board approved a seven-figure budget for a new one. They hired an outside consulting firm for a ludicrous amount of money. The consultants spent 6 months producing a 100-page report that said, in essence, you need a new system. It was useless. Marcus was panicking, so I stepped in. On my own time, over 3 months of sleepless nights, I designed the entire architecture. I mapped the data flows, designed the server infrastructure, wrote the migration plan, and spec'd out the software. I handed Marcus a complete blueprint, a turnkey solution. He presented it to the board the next day. My name was never mentioned. When I quietly confronted him about it, he didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. He said, "Daphne, this is about executive cohesion. The board needs to see a unified front from leadership. It looks better if the plan comes from the COO." I was so stunned by the sheer naked audacity of the theft that I couldn't even speak. I just nodded. What else could I do? Quit? I needed the job, and a part of me, a deeply ingrained, foolish part, felt a sense of ownership over the systems. I couldn't just abandon them. I had built them. They were, in a strange way, my children. The breaking point with Alex had come 6 months ago. He had been tasked with decommissioning an old email server, a simple routine job, but Marcus had given him the wrong server name in the instructions. It was a typo in an email, a single digit off. Alex, being careful, came to me to double-check before he powered it down. He said, "Daphne, this server seems to have active traffic on it. The decommission target shouldn't. Are you sure this is the right one?" I checked. Of course it wasn't. Alex had caught a mistake that would have taken down the entire company's internal communications. He had saved the day. I told him to hold off and went to Marcus to correct the information. Marcus didn't thank Alex. He called him into his office and berated him for questioning directives and not moving fast enough. I overheard it from my desk. I walked over and stood in the doorway of Marcus's glass cage. I said, "It was my mistake, Marcus." I told him to pause. Alex was just being thorough. Marcus looked at me, then at Alex, his eyes cold. He said, "I expect my people to execute, not to navel gaze. Don't coddle the interns, Daphne. It makes them weak." In that moment, I saw him for what he truly was. He wasn't just an arrogant, credit-stealing fool. He was a force of entropy. He didn't build things. He just stood on top of them and claimed ownership. He didn't cultivate talent. He stamped it out, fearing anyone who might one day eclipse him. All these memories, these little acid drips of indignation, coalesced into a single hard thought as the flight attendant asked me if I wanted a drink. The rage wasn't hot. It was cold. It was the calm, clean anger of a mathematician who sees a flaw in an elegant proof. The equation was unbalanced. My work, my loyalty, my dedication on one side, and his empty, self-serving ego on the other. It was unsustainable. Something had to give. A memory of my father surfaced. He was a master mechanic, a man who could diagnose an engine by sound alone. He smelled of oil and integrity. He once told me, while we were rebuilding a carburetor on his old pickup truck, "Daphne, never build an engine that you can't take apart. Knowing how to build it is only half the job. Knowing how to deconstruct it, piece by piece, that's how you truly own it." The plane began its descent toward the tropical green of Fiji. The countdown timer on my phone read 64 hours, 12 minutes, 3 seconds. The despair was gone. The exhaustion was gone. In their place was a crystalline, diamond-hard resolve. This wasn't about a vacation anymore. This wasn't even about the job. It was about architecture. It was about proving that a foundation built on lies and disrespect cannot stand. I finally understood what I had to do. It wasn't about revenge. It was a structural integrity test, and I was about to watch the whole rotten building collapse in on itself. The plan wasn't born in a single flash of vengeful inspiration. It was a slow crystallization of years of defensive programming. I called the system Cerberus, after the three-headed hound of Greek mythology that guarded the gates of the underworld. It felt appropriate. My creation guarded the gates of the company's data, its lifeblood. Marcus and the other executives thought the automation I'd built was a simple, friendly Labrador, a set of scripts that fetched data, ran backups, and optimized shipping routes. They had no idea it was a hellhound, and they had no idea I'd spent years forging its chains, each one a response to their own incompetence and neglect. Cerberus wasn't designed to be a weapon. It was designed to be a suit of armor. In a company that refused to invest properly in IT infrastructure, that saw cybersecurity as a budgetary line item to be trimmed, I had to build my own defenses. Every time Marcus denied a request for redundant hardware, I wrote a more sophisticated failover script. Every time he refused to pay for proper security software, I built a more intricate internal monitoring protocol. Cerberus was the accumulation of 1,000 no's from management, each one forcing me to become more creative, more self-reliant, more insular. I was a digital survivalist, hoarding resources and building a fortress of code around the systems I was sworn to protect. The system had 3 heads, each with a distinct and vital function. The first head was Orthrus, the 2-headed dog that was Cerberus's brother in mythology. This was the part of the system they saw, the part they thought was the whole beast. Orthrus was the workhorse. It handled the daily grind, sorting through terabytes of logistical data, automatically adjusting truck routes based on weather and traffic, managing warehouse inventory levels, and flagging invoicing discrepancies. It was a masterpiece of efficiency that saved the company millions every year. Marcus loved to talk about Orthrus in board meetings, using phrases like our proprietary optimization engine, as if he'd written it himself. He was proud of the dog he could see. He had no idea about the other 2. The second head was the true Cerberus, the Guardian. This was the security and integrity layer, woven so deeply into the server operating systems and virtualization fabric that it was indistinguishable from the core functions. This layer didn't just look for outside threats. It monitored for internal instability. It performed constant, deep-level checks on data integrity, user permissions, and hardware status. And most importantly, it contained a protocol I'd named Hades Protocol. It was a dead man's switch, but a sophisticated one. The protocol required a master administrator, me, to log in with a unique encrypted 256-bit key and perform a system health attestation at least once every 30 days. If that attestation didn't happen, Cerberus would assume the master administrator was incapacitated or compromised. It would then do what any good guard dog would do: lock the gates. It wouldn't crash the system. That would be unprofessional. Instead, it would initiate a mandatory security lockdown. It would freeze the state of all virtual servers, take a final encrypted snapshot of all data, and then lock the entire system down behind a cryptographic wall that was, for all intents and purposes, unbreakable without my key. The public-facing message would be sterile and corporate. Mandatory security update in progress. It was designed to look like a catastrophic but legitimate security event, not an act of sabotage. It was the perfect trap, built not out of malice, but out of a paranoid obsession with stability. I had simply set the attestation timer to a 72-hour countdown, triggered by my network access, showing me leaving the country. The third head was the most dangerous, the one I prayed would never be needed. It was Tartarus's Gate, a final, scorched earth defense. If Cerberus detected a brute force attempt to bypass the Hades protocol, like, for instance, someone physically pulling the drives and trying to access them, or attempting to restore from a backup without the proper decryption keys, it would initiate a secure data wipe. It would overwrite every block of data on the primary servers and the backup arrays with cryptographic garbage, 7 times over. To any outside observer, it would look like a massive simultaneous hardware failure across the entire server farm, a freak accident of catastrophic proportions. It was my guarantee against being replaced. They couldn't just call in another IT firm to clean up my mess. If they tried to force the gate would swallow them whole. It was a terrifying piece of code, and its existence was my darkest secret. My plan wasn't just code and protocols, it was people, or rather, one person, Alex. Over the last year, I had been carefully preparing him, not to take over, but to be my witness. I never gave him passwords. I never gave him admin access to Cerberus. That would have been irresponsible and would have put him in legal jeopardy. Instead, I taught him how to see. I gave him access to a custom-built monitoring dashboard that showed a simplified, read-only view of Cerberus's status. It was a pane of glass into the machine's soul. He could see the network traffic, the server loads, the automated tasks being executed by Orthrus. He couldn't change anything, but he could observe the truth. He was my spy camera. The week before I left, I'd called him into the server room. The air was cool and smelled of ozone and clean electricity. I handed him a sealed envelope. I told him, Alex, this is not to be opened unless two conditions are met. 1, I am out of the country, and 2, the system shows a Hades protocol alert on your dashboard. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and concern. He asked what was in it. I told him, not passwords, instructions. Instructions on how to communicate with me securely, what to observe, what specific log files to save, and most importantly, what to say to management. I told him, your only job is to be a good witness. Be calm, be methodical, and just report what the system is telling you. Let the machine do the talking. He nodded, understanding the gravity of the moment even if he didn't understand the specifics. He was my loyal soldier, and I had just given him his orders for a war he didn't know was coming. But the final piece of leverage, the one that existed completely outside the company's walls, was the human element. The true source of my power wasn't a system, it was trust. Specifically, the trust of Maria Sanchez, the head of logistics for global imports, our biggest and most important client. The sales team had won the contract, but I was the one who kept it. Maria was like me. Pragmatic, no nonsense, and utterly allergic to corporate doublespeak. We had forged a bond over late-night calls, fixing problems that our respective companies' glossy brochures and smiling salesmen couldn't. There was the time Agile Freight's billing system had a glitch and started triple invoicing her. Marcus told her it was a known issue being escalated. I called her on her cell, walked her through a database fix, and had corrected invoices in her inbox within an hour. There was the time a container of their most valuable goods went missing in the system. The account manager told her they were tracing the shipment. I dug into the raw GPS data, found the truck sitting idle at a rest stop in Nevada because of a driver error, and got it moving again. Maria didn't trust Agile Freight Dynamics. She trusted Daphne. A week before my vacation, I sent her a carefully worded personal email. It was short and subtle. I wrote, "Hi Maria, just a friendly heads up. We have some significant mandatory system maintenance scheduled for the week of June 10th. I'm not sure of the exact operational impact, but I always recommend our key partners ensure they have independent backups of all critical shipping data. Hope all is well." It was a perfectly professional, deniable communication, but I knew Maria. I knew she would read between the lines. I wasn't warning her about a system update. I was telling her that the one person she trusted to keep her cargo moving was about to be out of the picture. I was planting a seed of doubt, a small, quiet question in her mind. If Daphne is warning me, who is going to be watching the store? I had built the machine, I had trained my witness, and I had primed the client. All the pieces were on the board. All I had to do was get on a plane. The game would start without me. The moment the wheels of the aircraft touched the tarmac at Nadi International Airport, a quiet vibration went through my pocket. It wasn't my phone. It was a small custom pager I'd built, a relic of a bygone technological era, repurposed for a single specific task. It used a global satellite network, completely independent of cellular or internet service. It could only receive one of 3 pre-programmed messages from a secure transmitter linked to my Cerberus system. This one was simple, a short, sharp buzz. It was message 1. The countdown has reached 0. Hades protocol initiated. I walked through the warm, humid air of the terminal, a stark contrast to the sterile, refrigerated chill of the server rooms. that had been my world for so long. I didn't rush. I let the tide of other passengers flow around me. I was an island of calm in their sea of holiday excitement. My vacation was just beginning, but back in an office building halfway around the world, the workday was ending, and a nightmare was dawning. I had done nothing. I had pressed no button. I had sent no command. I had simply boarded a plane and let the intricate clockwork I'd built over 6 years finally strike the hour. The beauty of my plan was its passivity. I wasn't an attacker. I was an absence. A void where a critical function used to be. I can picture the first signs. They would have been subtle. Around 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, an email to a client bounces back with an obscure error code. A warehouse manager notices the dispatch board is frozen, displaying the same data it was an hour ago. A financial controller trying to run an end-of-day report gets a spinning wheel of death that never resolves. These are minor annoyances, the kind of digital hiccups that happen a dozen times a day in a complex organization. They would have been dismissed. Someone would have told someone else to just try again in a few minutes. Someone would have blamed the internet. I imagine Marcus, packing his briefcase, shrugging on his perfectly tailored jacket, thinking about his dinner reservations. He might have heard a murmur of complaint, a low hum of frustration from the cubicles, but he would have ignored it. It was IT's problem. It was Daphne's problem. Except I wasn't there. By hour 3 of the lockdown, the whispers would have grown to a chorus of alarm. The core logistics services, the very heart of agile freight dynamics, would be seizing up. Truck manifests would refuse to generate. The system that optimized container space would be unresponsive. The automated check-in system for drivers would be offline. The entire complex dance of global logistics that I orchestrated from the shadows would have ground to a halt. The company was now a body with a severed spinal cord. The limbs were there, but the signals weren't getting through. This is when the panic would have found Marcus. He would have been interrupted at his dinner. His phone would have lit up with frantic calls. He would have returned to the office, his face a mask of irritation, and started demanding answers. His first call, of course, would have been to me. It would have gone straight to my voicemail, which I had changed just before boarding my flight. The new message was my voice, calm and clear. "Hi, you've reached Daphne. I am on vacation and completely unreachable until June 21st. I will not be checking messages. If this is an emergency, please contact my manager, Marcus Thorne." A perfect professional checkmate. It funneled all the panic, all the blame, directly back to him. Then he would have turned on Alex. I can see the scene so clearly. Marcus, his face flushed with anger, storming over to the IT area, demanding to know what was going on. And Alex, my quiet, methodical apprentice, would be sitting there, looking at his dashboard. He wouldn't be panicking. He'd be following my instructions to the letter. He would look up at Marcus, his expression one of calm, professional concern. He'd say, "It appears to be a cascading security protocol, Marcus. The system logs show it's an integrity check. I've never seen it before. It seems to be locking down all core functions." He would be telling the absolute truth. He would be the perfect witness, a human printout of the system's status. By hour 6, the real chaos would begin. Every screen in the logistics department would have gone dark, replaced by the single terrifyingly benign message I had composed months ago. Mandatory security update in progress. Do not power down. Authentication required. ETA, unknown. The word unknown was my personal touch. It was a masterstroke of psychological warfare. It offered no hope, no timeline. It was a digital abyss. The phone lines would be melting. Clients would be screaming. The cost of the shutdown would be mounting not by the hour but by the minute. Every truck sitting idle, every container not loaded, was money burning. I checked into my hotel, a small beautiful bureau, right on the water's edge. I changed into shorts and a t-shirt. I walked out onto the small balcony, sat in a comfortable wicker chair, and opened my laptop. Not my work laptop. That was sitting in a desk drawer back home, its hard drive encrypted into oblivion. This was my personal machine, matte black and anonymous. I connected to the hotel Wi-Fi, and opened a secure, encrypted chat client. A single green light was blinking. Alex, I sent one character, a question mark. The reply came back instantly. The zoo is open. The monkeys are screaming. Marcus is trying to get a third-party IT contractor on the phone, but their security clearance won't let them pass the lobby. He's threatened to fire me 3 times. I typed back, report what you see, not what you think. Stick to the logs. You are a censor, not an analyst. Roger that, he replied. He's on the phone with legal now. Something about dereliction of duty. I closed the laptop. Dereliction of duty. That was rich. I looked out at the Pacific Ocean, a vast expanse of impossible blue. The sun was setting, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and purple. The air was warm, and smelled of salt and tropical flowers. My work phone, which I had brought with me for this exact moment, began to ring. I had it on a special plan, a global roaming package I'd paid for myself. The screen lit up with Marcus Thorne's name. I watched it ring, the sound an alien intrusion in the paradise around me. It rang and rang, a desperate, unanswered plea from a world away. When it finally stopped, a notification popped up. Voicemail, then a text. Call me, you Argent. Then another call, then another. I put the phone face down on the table, picked up a cold bottle of Fiji water, and took a long, slow sip. It wasn't about revenge, it was about silence. The beautiful, powerful, and deeply satisfying silence of an unanswered call. The first 24 hours were a symphony of Marcus's unraveling, conducted by me from a beach chair with a paperback novel in my lap. Alex was my orchestra, providing a running commentary of the chaos through our secure channel. The third-party IT firm Marcus had called, a big, soulless corporate contractor, had arrived and been completely stymied. As I had designed, they couldn't even get past the initial network layer. Cerberus viewed their diagnostic tools as a hostile intrusion, and locked them out completely. Their official assessment, which Alex dutifully forwarded me a screenshot of, was a masterpiece of corporate jargon that boiled down to one simple fact: they had no idea what they were looking at. They recommended a full physical audit of the server architecture, which was their polite way of saying they wanted to start pulling wires. Marcus, to his credit, was smart enough to know that was a bad idea. He was trapped. The real leverage, however, wasn't the lockdown servers, it was the clients. A system being down is a technical problem. A major client threatening to walk is an existential crisis. The first domino to fall was exactly the one I predicted. On the morning of the second day, my personal cell phone rang. It wasn't Marcus this time. The caller ID read Maria Sanchez, Global Imports. I let the sound of the gentle lapping waves be the background music for the most important call of my career. I answered, my voice deliberately calm and relaxed. Maria, hello. What a surprise. Daphne, her voice was tight, a compressed spring of pure frustration. There was no preamble. Our shipments are dead in the water. The tracking system is dark. Our containers are sitting on the docks, and I have a dozen ships waiting for manifests that don't exist. I've been on the phone with Marcus Thorne for the last 12 hours, and all he's giving me is corporate nonsense about a server patch. What in the hell is going on? I took a slow breath, a calculated pause. I said, Maria, I'm so sorry to hear that. As you know, I'm on a long overdue vacation that was personally approved by Marcus. I'm in Fiji, actually. It's beautiful. I'm completely disconnected from the company's internal operations right now. I made sure to emphasize the word disconnected. There was a moment of silence on her end, not an angry silence, a thoughtful one. I could almost hear the tumblers clicking into place in her mind. She wasn't stupid. She knew I was the one who kept her world turning. She knew that my vacation and the system's update were not a coincidence. I had just handed her all the confirmation she needed, without admitting a single thing. I see, she said finally, her tone shifting from frustration to something else. Calculation. Let me know where you land, Daphne. We have a lot of logistics work, and we value partners who can guarantee uptime. The line went dead. It was done. She hadn't just terminated her relationship with Agile Freight Dynamics in her mind. She had just offered me a job, The company's biggest client was now my biggest asset. The next call from Marcus came an hour later. It went to voicemail, of course. I listened to it later that evening, sitting on my balcony, the stars a brilliant, unfamiliar canopy above. It was a recording of a man falling apart. It began with bluster and threats. "Daphne, this is Marcus. Your little stunt is going to be met with the full force of our legal team. You are in breach of your contract. This is corporate sabotage, a felony. You will be prosecuted." His voice was trembling with a rage that couldn't quite mask the high-pitched frequency of pure panic. Then the tone shifted to bargaining. The anger dissolved into a desperate plea. "Look, I don't know what this is about, but we can fix it. Whatever you want, a raise, a new title, Vice President of IT Operations, it's yours. Just call me. Just give us the password. Name your price, Daphne. Just name your price." It was pathetic. The man who wouldn't approve a 1-week vacation was now offering me a vice presidency. The title was as hollow as the man offering it. The voicemail ended with a sound I will never forget, a kind of broken, pleading whimper. "Daphne, please," he said, his voice cracking. "You're killing the company. You're killing me, the titan of industry, the master of the boardroom, reduced to a desperate child." I saved the recording, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of what happens when arrogance collides with a reality it can no longer control. I deleted the dozens of text messages, the missed calls, the frantic emails from HR and legal that had piled up. They were just noise. The voicemail was the signal. It was the sound of a power shift, so total, so absolute, that it was irreversible. The king was not just naked, he was on his knees, and I was an ocean away, watching the sun rise. The endgame began on the third day. I sent a single encrypted message to Alex. "Inform Marcus Thorne. I will accept a video conference at 1100 hours his time." I gave him the link to a secure, anonymous video service. This was not a negotiation. It was a surrender ceremony, and I was going to dictate the terms. At the appointed time, I sat on my hotel balcony, the turquoise ocean, a perfect backdrop behind me. I was wearing a simple linen shirt. I had a cup of coffee. I clicked the link. His face appeared on my screen, and I almost felt a flicker of pity. Almost. Marcus looked like he had aged 10 years in 3 days. His hair was a mess, his eyes were bloodshot, and the confident, commanding posture was gone, replaced by the slumped shoulders of a defeated man. Beside him, slightly out of focus, was a nervous-looking woman I recognized as the head of HR. They were in the main boardroom, the place where he had stolen the credit for my work, the place where he had built his throne. It seemed fitting. He spoke first, his voice raspy. "Daphne, we need the password." I didn't answer. I just took a slow sip of my coffee and looked at him. I let the silence stretch, an uncomfortable, damning void. The power in any conversation belongs to the one who is willing to wait. I was willing to wait forever. "Why are you doing this?" he finally asked, the question a mix of anger and genuine bewilderment. He still didn't get it. He thought this was about money or a title. I set my cup down. "I'm not doing anything, Marcus. I'm on vacation. You remember the one you approved? I'm in Fiji." Then I delivered the line I had been rehearsing in my head for 48 hours. I said, "You told me you would manage. Are you managing, Marcus?" His face went pale. The HR woman shifted uncomfortably. I had just used his own words as a weapon, turning his casual dismissal into a damning indictment of his failure. I continued, my voice even and calm. "The system isn't broken, Marcus. It's working perfectly. It's executing the Hades protocol, a security lockdown I designed to protect the company's data and infrastructure from catastrophic failure or instability. It triggers automatically when the master administrator is unexpectedly offline for more than 72 hours. It's a feature, not a bug. The instability, I pointed out, is what happens when the company's entire operational stability rests on one person, and leadership treats that person as expendable." He was speechless. I had reframed the narrative completely. I wasn't a saboteur. I was the responsible architect, whose safety features had been triggered by his own poor management. "I will restore the system," I said, leaning forward slightly, on one condition: my immediate resignation, effective today. In exchange, I require a severance package. The package will consist of 3 things. First, my full salary for the next 2 years. Second, a full and complete release from any and all liability, real or imagined. And third, I paused for effect, full, unencumbered ownership of the intellectual property for the automation suite known as Project Cerberus. The HR woman gasped. Marcus just stared, his mouth slightly open. But that's company property, he stammered. No, I replied, calmly and firmly, it's not. The core architecture of Cerberus was developed by me, on my own time, using my own resources, as a direct response to the company's refusal to adequately fund its own IT needs. My job description was to maintain the existing systems, not to build a new sentient one from scratch. You have no documentation for it. You have no source code. You have no claim. A lawyer I had retained weeks ago, a specialist in intellectual property, had assured me this was a legally defensible position, a gray area I could exploit. It was a plausible inaccuracy they were in no position to challenge. Checkmate. They had no choice. The company was hemorrhaging money. Their largest client was already halfway out the door. A protracted legal battle over IP was a fight they couldn't afford and would likely lose. I have the paperwork ready, I said. My lawyer will be sending it over in the next 5 minutes. Once I have a digitally signed copy back, I will enter the authentication key. It took them less than an hour. The signed document appeared in my encrypted inbox. I reviewed it, forwarded it to my lawyer for confirmation, and then, from my laptop on a balcony in Fiji, I opened a terminal window. I typed a single 32-character alphanumeric string. I hit enter. A message from Alex popped up on my secure chat. It's back. The lights are on. I closed my laptop. It was over. The fallout was swift and beautiful. The next morning, Global Imports officially terminated their contract with Agile Freight Dynamics, citing unacceptable operational instability. That one client represented nearly 40% of the company's annual revenue. 2 weeks later, my new consulting firm Cerberus Systems, LLC, was officially incorporated. Our first client was Global Imports, signed to a multi-year contract that was worth more than my previous 5 years of salary combined. My first official act as founder and CEO was to offer a job to Alex. He had already submitted his 2 weeks' notice. He accepted on the spot. I heard through the industry grapevine about a month later that the board of Agile Freight Dynamics had called an emergency meeting. Faced with a catastrophic loss of revenue and the public humiliation of having been brought to their knees by a single employee they had systematically undervalued, they did the only thing they could. They demanded a resignation. Marcus Thorne was fired for gross operational negligence. He was the captain who had scuttled his own ship because he didn't respect the engineer in the engine room. It was never about revenge. It was about a realignment. It was about putting value where it belonged. I sat in my new small clean office, a blank whiteboard on the wall waiting for new designs. Alex was beside me, his face glowing with excitement as we mapped out a new system for a new client. It was quiet. It was collaborative. It was respectful. It was everything Agile Freight Dynamics had never been. My name was on the door. It was a new reality, one I had built myself. In the end, it comes down to a simple truth. For 6 years, they told me I was irreplaceable, but they treated me like I was disposable. They were half right. The work I did was irreplaceable. The systems I built were the company's heart and lungs. But me, Daphne, the person, I was entirely replaceable, and I was the one who finally did the replacing. I replaced their chaos with my order. I replaced their disrespect with my own valuation. I replaced their broken structure with a new one, built on a solid foundation of competence and mutual respect. This story isn't just my story. It's the story of anyone who has ever poured their soul into their work, only to be overlooked, underestimated, or erased. It's for every quiet expert in every meeting, who knew the right answer, but was talked over by a louder, more confident, and more ignorant voice. Your value isn't determined by the title they give you or the salary they pay you. Your value is what you can build, what you can control, and what you can, if necessary, walk away with. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclamation. It was about taking my name off a project I no longer believed in and putting it on one that I did my own. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt that sting of being invisible at the very place you hold together, do me a favor and hit that like button. It truly helps to know that there are others out there who understand this fight. Leave a comment below and tell me about the moment you realized you had to build your own foundation, even if it meant leaving the old one behind. And if you want to hear more stories about flipping the board and rewriting the rules, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell, because sometimes the most powerful move you can make is the one no one sees coming.